Hello, welcome everybody. We want to thank everyone who is tuning in for tuning in. My name is Devon Elmore. I am a Spring 20 initiate of the Beta Omega chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, and today we will be having a women's panel, Women's History Month panel, with a few panelists, alumni, some expertise, and current students of LMU.
Hello, all. My name is Dylan Smith. I am also Spring 20 Initiative of Kappa Alpha Psi. And welcome. Thank you all for being here. So, when we wanted to do this panel, we were thinking, you know, why should why should we do a Women's History Month panel? And of course, it's Women's History Month, so let's give you a few facts about it. So, it actually started similarly to the Black History Month. And Negro History Week. So Women's History Month started as a week in 1980 and later was changed to Women's History Month in 1987, similar to Black History Month and Negro History Week. And some of the things that really was revolving around our minds was how things such as civil rights movements and movements in the past, Black women and women in general were neglected from the movements. So they had to create their own, such as like the Black feminist movement, because the civil rights movement, some of those were neglectful to the black women, and things such as like the movements of the Hill Thomas case, which were said to inspire things such as Say Her Name and Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement, which were all started by women. To name a few, Ella Baker, Alicia Garcia, Patrice Cullors, Opal Tometi, Joanne Robinson, just some of the few women that really made these movements possible. Um, Passing it off to you, Devon.
Yeah. And so like adding on to that, we kind of wanted to present this panel full of very prominent Black women that we know personally. And it is Women's History Month, so we kind of wanted to have a little panel just for ask questions about their experiences and what they kind of interpret this month to be as well as we know the kind of effects of COVID are starting to kind of diminish. So we're going to start seeing campuses open once again. So we wanted to actually have a conversation about how safe did they feel when it was open and how can we better prepare for the reopening. So now we are going to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist we have is Alize.
Hi everyone. Are we doing full introductions or are
No, yeah,
we
go
just
ahead, go ahead. Yeah, full introduction,
okay?
like name, what your major was, and the organizations. Mhm.
Okay, sounds good. Well, hello. My name is Alize. Gender pronoun she, they, or they is just fine. I am an alum of LMU. I graduated class of 2019 with my BA in sociology. I also minored in film studies and African American studies. And during my time in undergrad, I had the opportunity to be a part of some dynamic student organizations, one of them including the Radiant Rho Eta chapter of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated. Since graduating, I hopped straight into a grad program. I don't know who told me to do that, but we're here, so it's okay. Well, I will be receiving my Master's of Arts in Higher Education Administration. I'm glad to be here. Thank you all for having us.
Thank you for being here. Our next guest is going to be Devin.
Hi, I'm Devin. I'm a I really don't know how to introduce myself. I'm a junior psychology major with a minor in African American Studies and Business Administration. I'm pretty much involved in most cultural clubs on campus at LMU. Some things that really got me here is that I was heavily involved at hashtag Black at LMU, which is something I know I'm very close to, like the creators of that and like the leaders of that. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Our next guest is going to be Paisley.
Hi, everybody. My name is Paisley Sutton. I graduated in class of 2020 from Loyola Marymount. I was a film production major, African American Studies minor, and some involvement on the campus. I crossed fall 2019 into the truly charismatic chapter of Tau Kappa, of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And now I am a current graduate member of the Tau Beta Omega chapter in Marina del Rey. And yeah, and I'm here today. I'm glad to be talking about women and to be talking about Women's History Month, because it's so important to just keep the conversation going.
Thank you so much, Paisley, for that. Next, we're going to have Miss Lauren.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Morrison. I am a senior psychology major with a minor in bioethics at LMU. After graduation, I will be going to Stony Brook University to receive my PhD in clinical psychology. And on campus, I'm involved in a few things, but I am president of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated Tau Kappa chapter, and I have also been very active in the Black at LMU movement.
Thank you so much for that. And then we have a special guest, Dr. Angela Parker.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Dr. Angela Parker. I am the Director of Trainings and Programs at Genesee Center. For those of you who are not familiar with our organization, we are the oldest domestic violence intervention program in South Los Angeles. And we do a lot of work in the community just to speak about like how to have healthy relationships, how to recognize if you're in a domestic violence situation and the different resources that are available. We also have the arm, which I run, where we come to college campuses and we have conversations around domestic violence. And I've actually done a couple of events at LMU in the last couple of years. So I was really thrilled that you guys invited me. So thank you so much. It's a thrill to be here.
Yeah, of course. So now that we have all the introductions, we can just start. Dylan, do you want to start?
Sure. Thank you all. So to go right into the questions, the first question I have is, what role has the creation of the NPHC, or the Divine Nine Sororities, played in women's history? Feel free to answer.
I can start us off. So the first thing that comes to mind for me, honestly, is just space. So with the establishment of sororities, like Black women in particular, were really given the opportunity to find that space, to be in community with one another, and to find that sisterhood, that, speaking particularly about like PWIs, that you might not necessarily see or might be hard to come by. And so I feel like incorporating that into Women's History Month, it's who we are. Like, Black women are a part of the community. And so in having sororities being, having sororities help us join into that community. And like I said, just be one with each other and find that sisterhood. So yes, lost my thoughts there, but we're back.
I will also add to that in saying that a lot of these organizations are more or less like a business. So when we have different program targets, a lot of these do focus on helping women. For example, AKA has the target for women's health and wellness, and a component of that is giving free mammograms to underserved communities. So in that way, they can kind of help those who would not be able to access them otherwise. So not only with finding sisterhood within each other, but like equity within the community and things like that.
Yeah, 100%. I want to agree with Lauren there, because I think that Black sororities, it's us taking agency within a patriarchal society, in a number of ways, by, just getting back into the community and directly being the only resources, whether it be mammograms or all of the Black sororities and fraternities that got out there and got people registered to vote, especially this past election cycle. I think that it's, just proof of us taking agency, especially women, Black women, taking agency in spaces where we had none, and being like, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to organize.
And Paisley, you talked about, creating agency within certain spaces that may not be like made for Black women. So I want to move to the next question of how would you all describe your experiences as Black women attending a PWI?
I can go. So I didn't attend LMU. I attended UCLA. And so UCLA is this really big school, and it always compare it to sort of like when they throw you like into the ocean and either you're going to sink or you're going to swim, because they're not going to throw a life vest out there to help you. Like, you're really on your own. And so, when you go to a PWI, for me, the experience really was having to create my own space. And for me, it was sort of, I'm older than you guys. So it was sort of that tug of war between trying to fit in with the dominant culture and at the same time, trying to be true to myself. And one of the things, as somebody who did not pledge a sorority, but I appreciated about sororities, was that it did make a space for me and help me, kind of find a path of how I could connect with other people that looked like me and thought like me. So.
I could say something. I'm not in a sorority, so I feel kind of left out in a bit. But my experience on a PWI campus as a Black woman, I would say maybe my first year as a freshman, I could describe it as lonely. Most of the time, you kind of have to look for people who look like you, and then sometimes people who look like you don't agree with you or don't like have the same interests as you, or all skin folk aren't kin folk, you know what I mean? And so that has been like a real struggle for me. And then just building on that, just looking around, a lot of the times I feel, this may just be me, a lot of times I feel like as a Black woman, Black men don't really show up on PW campus, and they kind of leave us alone in a sense, especially if we feel uncomfortable in situations, they always stay in the back. So it kind of feels like you're fighting for yourself, and or you have to look out for like other women. And although that's like kind of sad, like I would also say that once you do find your clique on campus on a PWI, that's a good group of people. Like, you don't really verge off into other people. Like, that's your group of people that you stay with and you care about.
I really think that's an interesting thing you said. And I just kind of wanted to piggyback off that, because I never had a lot of Black men in my classes. The only time I ever really saw Black men was like at a sporting event. And so it was hard, like on campus, to really kind of, you're right, to make a connection like with Black men or to see Black men. And I never thought about that, but you're absolutely right. It is a struggle.
Yeah, and I want to add on just to the question, because I think it can be tough with all of the microaggressions you deal with, whether it's about your hair or your attitude. And as someone who describes myself as like a very upbeat, bubbly person, it's all fun and games until you're not upbeat and bubbly anymore. For example, like I had a disagreement with a professor in one of my classes, and when I handled it with some of my students, I wasn't necessarily like coddling them or being upbeat about it. And I had a girl come up to me after class, and she was like, like at first I didn't like the way you were speaking to me, but after I went home and thought about it, like I got what you were saying. And I couldn't help but wonder if she would have that same reaction if I wasn't a Black woman speaking my truth to her. And so I think that can be tough, because as a Black woman, as a Black person, you deal with microaggressions, but as a Black woman, you have that added layer of not wanting to sound angry or dealing with the stereotype of the angry Black woman, and trying to choose how you want to come across so your message can actually be heard instead of just being stereotyped right off the bat.
I kind of want to like piggyback off of what you said, Lauren, about just in general, like in classrooms on a PWI campus, how like careful you have to be with certain professors about how you like introduce yourself, how you show yourself. It's constantly like a, oh, did I come off too much or am I doing too much right now? Because I actually had an issue with one of the things that my philosophy professor said. And philosophy is very interesting, especially as a Black person. And so I said, this is inherently racist towards Black people. And I said this in front of the class. And then he got mad at me. He emailed me aside and he was just like, I don't like how you were speaking to me. You came out very aggressive. And I was like, yes, I was aggressive because you were coming. I just matched your energy, sir. I'm not trying to be a type of person who's going to be like, oh, I'm so sorry. No, because you are wrong. And I'm going to tell you you're wrong. And I feel like all the time on campus, Black women, as we are seen in society, have to be the ones that are the caregiving and loving and kind and sweet and silent. And or if we're not that, we are loud and disrespectful and mean. So then we're bouncing off of these two ideas, that one, Sapphire, and then on the other, a mammy type of caricature of Black women constantly. And then on campus, people are pushing that ideal onto you, and you can't even be yourself without somebody pushing you into a stereotype. And it's exhausting. It's something that's one thing I completely agree about with you, Lauren.
But I want to say, as exhausting as it is for you ladies, you guys are in a much better place than I was, because when I was in your situation, these weren't even things that were thought about. You know what I mean? There wasn't the self-awareness. I mean, some people had it, but I know it weren't things that I thought about, and it wasn't things that other people around me thought about, sort of like, was I being treated differently because I was a Black woman? What is my responsibility as a Black woman to educate people or not to educate people? And I just feel like you guys are coming from such a place of empowerment that just didn't exist 10, 20 years ago, where you're more free to kind of be yourself, and you're more free to kind of match your professor's energies for energy. And I know it may be exhausting, but I think at the same time, you're a lot more liberated. And so to hear you guys and to see you guys, for somebody like me, it's just really just amazing. I just really think it's great that you guys own yourself. You own yourself and you own your power in a way that, frankly, 20 years ago, a Black woman on a PWI campus could not. So you guys are great.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. I wanted to go back to Lauren, a point Lauren brought up about Black men showing up. And I wanted to hear more about the thoughts about where that came from. So yeah, what role or responsibility do Black men carry in the conversation of Black women's safety? How do we help make you guys feel safer? Alice, do you want to start us off?
I definitely can. Again, first thing that's coming to mind is space, but not just space, but what space are we allowing what kind of conversations are we allowing into the space? I feel like certain conversations should be open, and this is definitely an open conversation. I do feel like sometimes when conversations around Black women are had, Black men definitely have their opinions, which is cool. And at the same time, are you really listening to me? When I tell you I'm uncomfortable, when I tell you I'm unsafe, or if I tell you, hey, can you walk me here? Or here are some ways you can help. Are you really listening to me? So not just necessarily having these conversations, but what space are you allowing in these conversations? Are you allowing the person to really be heard? Are you, thinking of ways or being open about ways you can help or be of assistance? Or is it just falling to deaf ears? So that is my take on it, you all.
Yeah, just to piggyback onto that, listening is the main thing for me. If Black men would actually start to listen to Black women, and when I mean listen and have nothing necessarily to counter or to offer to say afterward, but just sometimes just to listen. I think that a lot would start to be digested and start to be understood. And I think that would help Black women feel more safe, is just to recognize, okay, at least I'm being heard by my brothers, and to be treated like that, this is my brother, in public spaces. Just how, with these values of the Divine Nine, we have brotherhood and sisterhood. I think we need to reach that across gender lines and remember that we are all brothers and sisters, you know, and like if we treat each other like that, I think we could, you know, start to make some progress. But just to be listened to is what I would like. And that starts with stuff like this, which is amazing, you know? And I think that Black men need to encourage each other on campus to, you know, listen to, like, you know, be like, hey man, like, so say some guys complain about his girlfriend or whatever, be like, hey man, have you thought about the other side? Or just start to, like, you know, start to encourage each other to listen, like not just when a woman is present, but outside of that too.
Yeah, and that was a really good point, Paisley. I wanted to add on to that I think a huge part of the responsibility for Black men and their role for the safety of Black women is calling out their friends. So being able to go beyond like, well, I'm not a problem, therefore this issue isn't happening, but being able to look in their friend group, kind of like Paisley said, and being like, hey, yo, like that wasn't right. And I feel like that does tie a lot into harm that comes to Black women physically and emotionally, just because guys look the other way as opposed to actually addressing the issue.
And one point I really want to make is that when we were doing a lot of the sections at Black LMU, we had like Black women speak and then Black men speak, like not together but separately, and really talk about the issues. And I genuinely remember that a lot of Black women were saying that Black men need to push harder conversations onto one another rather than letting it blow off, because that really hurts Black women. And like when we were talking about misogynoir and just how we feel and like colorism, and then just how people are talking about us and how they describe us and how they describe our bodies, how they describe our hair, it's just like constantly like we feel unsafe around you because you don't see our identity as a person. You see it as something different and not, like Paisley said, sisterhood. You know what I mean? So that makes me feel unsafe. So now I don't feel safe with someone who looks like me. And that, I think, once Black men specifically push that conversation onto themselves, they can come to Black women on an equal footing rather than it feeling like a power dynamic. And I think that's when we can make real progress towards securing Black women's safety.
No, that's definitely understandable, and I do want to like kind of reiterate kind of like the why we are doing this is because we want to hear Black women's voices. We are trying to elevate your voices in spaces that you necessarily wouldn't have, you know, such an like high level volume of like what you are saying, and it's like we hear you, like we hear you, and we want to understand, and so we are having this conversation so we can hear firsthand. These are how Black women feel. So after this, we can go back to our brothers and be like, okay, this is how Black women feel. You all saw on the live stream. These are firsthand narratives of what they are talking about. So now let's take accountability as kind of like the fraternity in terms of what are the next steps? What are the action plans? So I do thank you for sharing those. And you all were mentioning kind of like being safe and not safe on campus. But I want to ask, like, in what ways did you feel safe? So that way we can give people a little bit more of an idea of how we can continue that conversation.
Well, I mean, I felt most safe in spaces where I didn't have to code switch, in spaces where, you know, I could feel myself. And by code switch, I mean, of course, you know, code switch around white people, but also sometimes you have to kind of code switch around men too. You know, I mean, there are just ways you have to present when you're around a man, sometimes where you like just have to do certain things that make you feel safer. And when I'm in spaces that I'm just seen, like Devin said, as a human, then I just feel like I can be myself in spaces where being a man isn't more valuable, you know, in spaces where having a specific opinion that it comes from an experience where I don't live that experience, you know, that's where I feel better, is where I get to just feel my own experience, and I get to be a Black woman. I get to be Black and be a woman, you know. It's like with that intersection of like not having to necessarily choose or anything like that, like where it's just like, okay, this is Paisley, like nothing more to it. And that mostly happens around Black women for me, you know, and I think slowly and surely, you know, as we have these conversations, now this is a space where I feel safe, you know, this is a space where I feel like I can share myself because I've been given that platform. We've all been given that platform. And so with more spaces like this, I think I'd feel safe on college campuses.
I think this is a really interesting question because I think for a lot of Black women, it's hard to feel safe, period, on a college campus. I mean, even physically, you always have to look around for your physical safety, right? That's one thing. And then you're always having to guard your emotional safety, whether your interaction with people in your classroom or different things like that. So, I mean, I know that the ladies can speak more about this and elaborate about this, but I mean, I don't know. Like if you ever feel really safe on campus.
I want to touch on something Paisley said because it didn't come to mind until she said it. But I have honestly felt most safe when I'm in community with other Black women. And I do, Paisley, you put in a very like interesting point, like being in a space where you don't necessarily have to like choose or feel like any type of agenda is being like forced on you. Like you're really just able to like sink in the experience for yourself, you know, with yourself. And I do feel like Black women, you know, have really been that that starting point for me to feel safe on campus, finding those niches and finding those little communities of Black women on campus. Outside of that, you know, that's a good point. It definitely does kind of take some thought. I honestly can't think of like an exact space, like maybe my bedroom, like maybe my dormitory, you know, but like even physically, like whether it's like she said, like having to observe within the parking lot, or you know, be aware of your physical safety, or being aware of your emotional safety and how you interact with others. Going to Paisley's point about code switching, like it's hard to really find those moments where you can be safe. I'm sure they're there, and I'm sure the communities are definitely, you know, being developed and cultivated, but a lot of work needs to be done. You know, I don't, that's it. So.
Yes, adding on to that, I wanted to pose another question. You all were talking about spaces, and I was asking what spaces can be created so that, you know, you can keep having these conversations as virtual work, like Clubhouse, Zoom, things of that sort. Like before we get like back in person, maybe COVID was a little good thing to start these conversations. You know, keep that little distance before, you know, we get back together. So, what spaces can be created, do you think?
I immediately, when you said spaces, I thought of my freshman year. I was lucky enough on LMU's campus, you know, with all the white people, all the Black girls were in my dorm. So I was like, yes, third floor. So we were just kicking it. And this one girl had this huge room, and she was like, everybody come over. We're going to do deep condition night. And we're going to watch some raunchy Black movie that makes no sense, and like everything's off, and we're just going to talk about our experiences on campus. We did that like 3-4 times. And I think, like you were saying, like Alize was saying, and like Paisley was saying, like I was just safe. Like the smell of deep conditioner, cocoa butter, just people chit-chatting, yelling, kikiing, like that made me feel so safe and at home. That was freshman year. Now as a junior, during Zoom class and just where the world is today, creating a safe space, I genuinely believe, for me, is borderline impossible, because hearing about Breonna Taylor terrifies me. Alize said your bedroom. I'm like, we can't even be safe in our bedroom. Like it's just like I can't even, like I always have to be on the defense. And so like we were talking about emotional safety. When I finally put my guard down, I feel like I'm too vulnerable to the world, that somebody's going to get me and I'm not going to be safe anymore. I'm not back in the dorm doing deep condition night. I'm in the world where everybody is out to get me and no one is on my side. And now my girls aren't by my side. Like no one is here. Everybody's behind a screen. But it's different when you have that real connection in person. There's something that the screen can't convey. And I think that like genuinely, and this is me coming as an RA, because I'm going to be an RA next semester too for LMU, is that I want to cultivate a space where like Black women in general can and yes, I'm being specific, Black women, if LMU is watching, Black women, they can come to me and just relax. Like, if anything happens, I have my guard up, you can have yours down for the first time today. You know, something where like you don't always have to be fighting or thinking about the next move or what happened in class or what that one person across the hallway said that was like, is that directed towards me or something? Like, I want to cultivate it because one, our PWI will refuse to acknowledge that this is happening because they want to say that we are inclusivity and there's, if we do make these spaces, and what about other people? And they want to be more divisive than community. So that's my look on it.
No, I think that's a great point about physical location. And although I will not be able to enjoy it because I will have graduated, that's why I think the Black space at LMU is going to be really important, and why like we really wanted to integrate that into the demands, because it's important to have spaces where you can be unapologetically Black. And Alize, it's funny because when you mentioned like you feel safe in your bedroom, I thought of my freshman year. I was living in Delray South, so I was not with all of the Black girls and everything. My roommate was Black, but then you have the issue of when I wanted to like get up or I had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I'm like, wait, do I need to take my bonnet off to go down the hall in case like a non-melanated person saw me? And now that we're in Zoom, it's like, well, what does that look like now when I'm like going from my bed to my desk to go to class and I want to keep my bonnet on? So like how can those things be made safer? But I think the promotion of being unapologetically Black, and like Dr. Angela, how you were talking about women or Black women now feel empowered in a way that they were not allowed to when you were at a PWI. I just hope we can keep fostering that sense of empowerment to the point where Black women can be unapologetically Black in all spaces, not only spaces with other Black women in them.
No, yeah, thank you for like, sharing those examples of like what does it take to kind of like be safe on these campuses. But I also kind of want to continue that latter half of the conversation. In what ways did you all feel unsafe? Like, what were some instances where you were like, I'm kind of like turned off by the situation. I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel like the space is for me. I don't feel like I belong here. Kind of like that.
I personally have definitely had a few like classroom moments where like, you know, I'm walking to the class for the first time and then I like sit and I get situated and I look around and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I'm the only one who looks like me. And then going forward, having those conversations in said classroom where you have to, you kind of navigate feeling like you're like that Black voice, but it's like you're just speaking on behalf of your truth and your experiences, you know? Yes, you know, I'm Black, you know, I can't change that. It's just who I am. At the same time, I don't speak for my community. I just speak on behalf of my experiences and myself. And yes, we do share commonalities, but looking to that person to always be that voice, I feel like isn't the way to go. So those have definitely been moments for me. I too will also say, and this is interesting because it's not necessarily directly like campus, but like studying abroad is something that also comes to mind for me. I don't necessarily know that like institutions take into consideration like that Black experience going into a different country, especially when they're like figuring out, you know, locations for particular programs. For example, I studied abroad in Argentina. Something I didn't know about Argentina is that there are not too many Black people there, you know? And I was also the only Black female or just Black person in general on that trip when I went. And that experience was just like foreign to me. Like literally having people come up because they've never seen a Black person and being like, oh my gosh, like, wow. And not to say that I didn't feel unsafe, but I don't know that any thought was made on behalf of the institution about that experience of being a Black person in that country, you know? So that's something that comes to mind for me.
And adding on abroad, that's a great point, because I studied abroad in London. And when I think of London, it's a diverse city. There are tons of Black people, but I and this could be like my ignorant, closed off worldview, but I did not anticipate that I would see such a difference between like being African American and being Black, like at a global family. Because if we're all African American here, we might know of like the nod is something you just do here. Like you see another Black person, it's like, what's up? But I went over there and they were like, why are you staring at me? Or like giving me a look. And it just like having to deal with different types. And I feel like that's also a layer of being an African American woman. That's hard when you are trying to find safe places in other places. And I feel like LMU did not adequately prepare me for that. I studied abroad and fully was able to meet Black people, was able to connect, and I'm still in touch with that experience. But that was kind of a scary space because it was my first time being away from home. I was like, wait, this community that I thought I would automatically have is not what I thought it would be. So that was kind of tough.
Yeah, piggybacking onto what you guys are saying about abroad experiences, like 100% LMU should have prepared. There should be some sort of representative in the LMU department who is not a student, because that's another thing. LMU loves trying to recruit students to be doing the work that the faculty should be doing. But there should be some way of preparing. And I know that I studied abroad in Germany, and it was a huge point of contention for me. Like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to get my hair done? Who am I going to talk to? Like, and I just remember sitting on a train for an hour, going to the only Black neighborhood in the next like 5 towns over so I could find a hair shop. And I literally like started crying walking into the hair shop, seeing people that looked like me, even though we didn't speak the same language at all. We talked like all day, and I just sat there and we just all had community. And I couldn't explain to my friends back in Bonn why I needed to just go away for a whole day and like not talk to anybody just to get my hair braided, and that's something that's hard. It's hard being like, walking around, people, like Alize said, seeing a Black person for the first time, and you having to not only deal with the weird microaggressions, but having to explain to your peers around you what's going on when they're saying weird things to you or asking weird things about your hair or skin and all sorts of stuff. And aside from abroad, I'd say that spaces where I have not felt safe have just been in spaces on LMU's campus that are, male centered, like in film, and I'm sure like in places like STEM, where it's so white male centered. There were not spaces for me. There were times where I've been in spaces where scripts were deliberately racist. And, I have to speak on behalf of all the Black people to say why this is wrong, or why I don't want to shoot that, or why I don't want to study a film that is just inherently racist, and so I feel like sometimes as a student and as a Black student, you have to wear 2 hats. You have to be a student, and you also have to be like, the police of like what's acceptable and what's not at a PWI, because people aren't thinking and aren't considering, and that can take away from learning, which you're there to do.
Right. Thank you so much, Paisley. And it's so interesting to think about the double hat situation and how you must be prepared, just to go out into the world. This is directed to you, Dr. Parker, since your expertise is in domestic violence, what type of, what can you say to like help prepare women against domestic violence or violence on campus? Is there anything you could offer? As far as advice.
So here's the thing, right? So recognizing violence or in your relationship or violence on campus is not as easy as you initially would think, because a lot of things that are actually toxic start off seeming kind of romantic, right? So let's say you get involved with somebody and they're texting you like all the time. They might be stalking you or like trying to get a hold of you and making sure that they know what you're doing. But your first instinct is like, oh, he or she cares so much about me because they're stalking me all the time. They want to go places with me because they just feel that I'm safe. They don't want me to hang out with so-and-so because, they just are looking out for me and they think so-and-so is a bad influence. They want to, they're following me like on all my social medias, just, because they like me and they want to like my pictures and all different stuff like that. So what I always caution people to do is look at the pattern of behavior and intent. If somebody is doing something that starts to feel controlling and is making you feel uneasy or afraid, always trust that instinct. If you're having a situation with someone and you're talking, you can't communicate with them, that's also a red flag too. Because if they're trying to gaslight you, and everybody, this great now is everybody knows what gaslighting is and different things like that. You're able to kind of see that and able to see what's going on. But sometimes you don't recognize it until you're in the relationship. Like you're in it 6 months, you're in it a year. Very few people recognize it like in the very beginning, because when you're with somebody who's an abuser or a potential abuser, they present their best selves to you. Like they are like the person that you've been dreaming of like your whole life. And the abuse doesn't happen until they hooked you, because that's the hook, right? The hook is to be everything that you want them to be. So my advice is, once you start recognizing those red flags, get out as soon as you can. Don't punish yourself for not seeing it sooner. Reach out for help depending on the situation. If you feel like the situation is violent, you may need to reach out to somebody campus administrative to make sure that you might have to change your dorm, you might have to change your classes, you might have to get a restraining order. Make sure that you tell a friend or a family member so people know what's going on, and that you don't keep it to yourself. Like every situation is different, but what I tell people is like trust your instinct. And the minute that you feel like something is not right, get out. But again, don't punish yourself because you didn't see it in the first 5 minutes. Because let me tell you something, I've been doing this for 15 years and nobody sees it in the first 5 minutes ever.
Paisley, I saw you nodding your head. Did you have something to add?
Oh, no, I just was nodding just in agreement because it seems like, that's how I did. Just all great facts, to not punish yourself, because I see that's something that a lot of women do. When we make a mistake or anything, we tend to punish ourselves because, we're living in a world where we have to constantly micromanage ourselves. But I think forgiveness is such an important thing when it comes to healing, especially with women who have dealt with domestic abuse or any type of violence.
Or even like rape, which unfortunately is a big thing on campus, and thank goodness the conversation about rape is so much better than it was in the past. But there's still, kind of this thing like, maybe you shouldn't have been at that party. Maybe you shouldn't have went up to his room. Maybe you shouldn't have had that drink. You know what I mean? There's still an element of kind of victim blaming to that. And I always tell women that the only person responsible for the crime is the person that committed the crime. You didn't do anything wrong, and there isn't anything that you could have done differently. And so that's always something to be aware of too. I always tell people, and this is just my little tidbit, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but you cannot consent to a sexual relationship if anybody's intoxicated. I'm sure you guys heard that, right? And so it doesn't matter if you're drinking or if they're drinking. If the person wakes up the next morning and says, I was drunk, I didn't consent to this, it's rape. All right. And so that's always something I want to throw out too, so people know under California state law.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parker. I wanted to touch on, many of you talked about wearing this double hat as not only being female, but Black. Can you add on to that? What is it like wearing this double hat? How is it different from being white and a female? Let's see. Alize, can you start us off?
It's interesting because like I've been in situations where like I've been asked this question before, and it's always interesting to like take a step back and really think about that experience, because you just do it, and so you don't necessarily think about it, or you don't necessarily process it. It's just how you survive, it's just how you adapt. And so for me, I feel like I don't know. It's just it's always a navigation. It's always a matter of like figuring out, okay, what type of environment am I in? What situation am I in? Who's around? Going to Paisley's point, you know, how do I need to present myself in this situation? Which can be tricky. And that shouldn't even be a thing because the only person I should have to show up as is myself, authentically myself. Regardless of who's in the space, regardless of whatever, you know, type of energy is in that space, I should still feel comfortable showing up as myself. So I'm not sure. Those are my thoughts for now.
Yeah, I think to Alize's point, which I think she said quite brilliantly, you know, I don't know how it's different from being white, but I can imagine that all white women have to do basically show up and be their authentic self, and they don't have to think about any of these things that we have to think about. And that's probably the difference from what I could see.
One thing I was thinking about, kind of with like the last point that we were talking about feeling safe and what spaces make us feel safe, is kind of off campus, but going to parties in general. So when you go to a party at a PWI, you usually don't want to go to those parties because they're lame. But when you do, and you have to, because everybody said go, so you go, and then there's a moment, like at least for me, that I can speak on, that I'm like, oh, I can't be too black right here. Like you sing a song or you dancing with your girls, like all your black girlies, everybody stops and looks at you. That's uncomfortable. Or let's say a dude is hitting on you. Doesn't matter what ethnicity, honestly, or what race they're about. They really just come on you tough. And you look around and then you look at the black men. The black men are doing nothing but watching. I feel unsafe. I'm like, okay, so now I got to really buck up and be like, you need to back off. And then you don't want to get too loud because now you're being aggressive. You're going to make everybody uncomfortable because you have been, your personal space has been violated, and you protecting yourself is seen as aggressive and then being an angry black woman. So I would say a lot of the times, like I use like a party situation because it's happened to me before where people just come to me differently. Like one, people don't respect that I'm a woman. Or two, they just don't respect that I'm like a black person in general. Like I went to a party once and this dude was singing the lyrics, but as the only black person there, he wanted to say the N-word to me. I was like, oh, for sure. Like this is what we're doing today. Cool. I don't know how to handle this right now. So I'm just going to leave because I feel uncomfortable. And now I'm unprotected because no one came to my safety and or my rescue. Or then as a female in general, as a woman, people would just be aggressive towards me sexually and just try to touch me. And I'm like, do not touch me. So now I have to put on this front. So there's like constantly, for me at least, again, I'm only speaking for myself because I can't speak for everybody, is that black and like being a woman, even when I was like asked in a class, I'm always black first and woman is always second because that's what first thing everybody sees is I'm black. And then maybe at the end of the day, they'll respect me as a woman.
Can I ask you ladies a question? Do you guys want or expect black men to come to your rescue? Like if you're in a situation or you're in a party, you're out or something like that. Like, is that a want or an expectation? Or is that, are you guys just used to like, oh, I'm going to have to take care of myself, so I'm just going to automatically go into like, you know, defense mode or different things like that? You know, because, you know, women of earlier generations are taught like, you know, you just need to know how to take care of yourself, right? But it's interesting listening to you ladies talk. It seems like you want that. You want that protection. Am I getting that correct?
Well, I think kind of oh, go ahead.
No, Paisley, you got it. You got it. You got it.
I wrote kind of on this a little bit, and the only thing I thought of is like, hey, growing up, you know, with the princess stuff, I think part of me like used to want a man, specifically a black man, to like, you know, have my back in a situation, mostly just because I understand now that femininity, especially white femininity, is tied to very specific kinds of, you know, tropes, being taken care of, you know, innocence, naivete, and like, you know, needing protection. And then black womanhood is so much in the opposite of that. You know, black women just as you're saying, like growing up, it's like take care of yourself, you know, watch your back, you know, like come prepared, you know, everything. They like work twice as hard to get half as much, all these different things. And I think I used to feel like I was fighting for men to be like, you know, like Black men, hey, like come help me. But now I think I'm fighting more for people to recognize that I'm not going to be a woman in the same way that a white woman is seen as a woman, you know? And I think that's something that Black women, especially me as myself, had to recognize. You know, I can't expect to be treated like a white woman because I'm not. And those are not the values that I should be seeking out. I should be seeking out, like Alize was saying, being myself, being my most authentic self in a space, Black woman, whatever, you know? And I think it's kind of like that inner battle of growing up, all those messages, be a princess, be saved, you know, and at least for me, I definitely was brainwashed by that for a while. And now I'm trying to move out of it. But it would be nice for Black men to like, you know, be there every once in a while, like so that I don't got to feel unsafe walking back to my car. It's more like I think I see like, you know, sometimes people going more to the side of white women to help them out when there might be an unsafe situation. It's more like, oh, Paisley, she got it, you know, like it's like, oh, the Black woman, she got it.
Yeah, I want to add to that, Paisley, answer the question, because like just for the question in general, I don't want to have to rely on Black men to like come to my or whatever. Just from a pure safety standpoint, I know that my older brother feels a lot safer like going to a gas station at 9 p.m. than I do as a like just as a woman, and then a Black woman on top of that. But I just think my taser cannot throw hands like another person can. So in that sense, to know that someone else is in your corner and know that someone is backing you up, I do want that. I don't wish I had to have that sort of protection, but I do think it is sort of necessary because I've had my parents tell me that they worry about different things for me than they do about my brother because I am a woman. So as much as I want to take care of myself, I know that the world does not work that way or does not want to afford me the opportunity to do that. And off of Paisley's point about like being a woman, but also being a Black woman, I wonder the lack of protection for Black women specifically has to do with the fact that Black women are perceived as more masculine than white women. And if that or like more masculine and the strong Black woman stereotype, and if that has to do with why other groups assume that we don't need the same protection as white women might.
And I kind of want to answer your question also, Dr. Parker. Just, I don't expect Black men to come to my rescue because I can take care of myself because from a young age, my mom has taught me to be, you got it, you could take care of yourself. You don't really need anybody. But kind of what like Lauren was saying, it's nice to know you're there, but it's also sad at the same time to know that you have to be there in my corner. But it's also kind of, in a sense, minimizing, and like you go into like a room, like in any room, and I look for Black people immediately. I'm like, okay, there you are. Like, and just in general, and if you go to like, let's say the party setting again, and then you see that Black person, instantly in my head, I'm like, so you see me, I see you. If things go left, we both know we gotta go. And then if you see this happening to me, I thought we were cool. I thought we just had that moment where you're like in my corner. You don't have to step up or say anything, but a quick like back up or like, hey, that would really help because most of the time, people love to turn a blind eye to Black women. Like I think, yeah, Lauren was saying is that like, because we're perceived as masculine and strong and we could take care of it. That's overbearing. Once again, we were talking about these walls that we have up already as Black women, emotionally, now physically, mentally, and just everything. Like we can't have a moment of peace that now that this extra thing that I have nothing to deal with is on top of me is just gonna make me feel overwhelmed at the end of the day. So yeah, I think I would rather have a Black man in my corner rather than me like having to fight it all again by myself, like I'm fighting the rest of the world.
To that,
Can I add to? Is that room? It's okay.
go ahead.
Are you sure? Okay. Dr. Parker, to your point, first of all, Paisley, Lauren, Devin, you all are like hitting the nail on the head. Yes. Something that this conversation is like bringing up for me is this idea. I'm not too sure on the term, so don't quote me, but I think it's called adultification, or just like this idea that Black women are expected to kind of be adults and like be prepared and be that strong, backbone in a lot of society, and it's kind of
the right
like
term.
enforced on us at a very young age.
That's the right term.
And I definitely grew up in a family where we are predominantly female. We are all Black. Hoorah, hello, we in it. And it's I have been aware of that, like at a very young age, like having to be aware, understanding the world that we live in, like Lauren said, may not be equipped to protect me in the way that I need protection, which is unfortunate, but this is the world that we live in. And to your question, Dr. Parker, I don't necessarily, and to Devin's point too, I don't think that is I expect Black men to help. I feel like the bare minimum, like at least I expect them to be aware. I expect them to have some type of awareness about at least, our experiences as Black women, or like, how we might have to navigate certain situations, or just like having that awareness in general could be really fruitful and really helpful when we are presented with certain situations that we don't know how to navigate, whether it's a matter of them stepping in, whether it's a matter of just their presence. I think that awareness is a great starting point.
To that, Alize, I wanted to ask an additional question. So you were talking about expectations before, and I wanted to ask, do you think that there is a loss about the loss of being authentically feminine, like the expectation of, Black women being more masculine, like someone said before? Do you think that that has been completely lost? Can you explain more about that?
Go ahead. No, go, Devin. Go. You got it.
Okay. I like, my favorite example of this, in a sense, is Serena Williams. I grew up playing tennis, so a long time. So when I saw people trying to compare Serena Williams to a man, and then making a caricature of her as a gorilla, and having her to be constantly tested to see if she's taking steroids, and that it's not fair to play against her. Specifically, there was an article that says it's not fair for Serena Williams to play against white women because she's just physically superior. And I remember reading that, and I thought, like, so all of a sudden, like, everything that like Paisley was saying earlier, like being a princess growing up, I'm thinking Princess Tiana, like Snow White, Cinderella, like I'm not that because I'm Black. And then even building off of that, going deeper, adultification of Black women in general, we have to grow up from a very young age, and then we have to be usually aware of our bodies from a very young age. So then, in a sense, we can't even be the innocent, lollygagging, happy, like type of woman that everybody expects us to be. We know what you're thinking, we see what you're thinking, and we see your intentions. Thus, that makes us look more threatening, in a sense, than other women who seem to be more innocent and unaware of the world. And I think that was kind of stolen from us, from all these types of stereotypes that are pushed onto Black women and then sexualized about them. And so now Black women have to constantly be in fear that them being feminine is them going to be sexualized, and that can lead to a completely different situation.
Amen. That's all I can say. Amen. Like, just 100% to everything.
Lauren, can you say what you shared in the chat?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. But as soon as Alize brought up the point about adultification, not about how families accuse their little Black girl of trying to be too grown or too fast, like, because God forbid a 6-year-old gets a silk press or anything, or a halter top or anything like that. And this is over-sexualization of Black girls, and it ends up being dangerous as they grow into vulnerable adolescence. And by that, I just mean that when Black girls are sexualized in the way they are, as they grow older, more eyes go to them. They're more likely to be catcalled or sexually harassed. And as adolescents, I mentioned that vulnerable state because that's like when you may be getting, when you might be starting to get interested in romantic relationships. And I think that's what Dr. Parker was alluding to when toxic behaviors seem romantic. And I think more so at that age because you don't necessarily have life experience to look at things as toxic. It's just like, oh, like they gave me a compliment or oh, they think I'm so pretty. And I think that this just starts at a very young age and Black girls are not used to it's. I will say it's reinforced by the Black family household by the over sexualization as opposed to like knocking down those kind of comments and like causing them to look at it as maybe this isn't a compliment, maybe it is toxic or maybe it is pedophilic and things like that.
Thank you so much.
And Lauren has a great point because again, back to happening at a very young age, it's kind of like, what do we tell girls, right? When we come home and say, you know, Bobby pulled my hair. Oh, it's because he liked you. Or, you know, he pushed me. Oh, he's just paying attention to you because, you know, we teach girls to equate violence and toxicity with love, right? Before they even really know what love is. And so that's to your point. That's something that we as a society and as families have to catch ourselves doing and stop doing.
No, and Dr. Parker, like I just want to go back on that point. Definitely does make sense because even in the conversation about how especially Black men are taught to grow up, and the way that they show affection is through physical violence. Like this is just how they communicate. Black men, they pull your hair because he likes you, he likes to touch you, this and that. But without having that conversation about what are the toxic traits that masculinity can exude onto Black women, you kind of have these situations where Black women are stuck in this kind of like cyclic type of relationship where they again equate violence to like affection and romance and love.
And another thing that happens to Lauren's point, because we keep telling young girls, oh, you're so mature, particularly Black women, you're so mature. So because I'm so mature, I can have a 20-year-old boyfriend, right? At 14 or 15 because, oh, I'm so mature, right? And we normalize that stuff, right? When, you know, in reality, like if you're 30 years old, you shouldn't have like a 15-year-old girlfriend. Like there's something wrong with that. But again, it becomes, like she says, a adultification of Black girls from a very young age where they get pushed into these situations that we just automatically normalize because they're like, oh, they can handle it, you know? And the thing too about masculinity and femininity of Black women, you know, I'm of two minds of that. Because I think sometimes, as Black women, we are never going to be able to be the ideal of other kind of races and how they see femininity, because that's just not the way that we're built. And so sometimes I wonder if the issue, I know we sort of tie ourselves into knots, kind of trying to figure out how we can fit into that role. But sometimes I wonder, and kind of when I say this is controversial, so if it's really kind of not us that needs to start doing the changing or trying to fit into that role, but if it's really other people that need to start accepting us the way that we are. So I'll just throw that out there because that's something
I think that's so true, Dr. Parker. Like, I think that kind of like, you know, what I was saying earlier, like Black women are not women in the same way that other women are women, you know, and that goes down culturally, historically, physically, everything. Like, and I mean, we could even get into a conversation about gender, you know, and like what that really even means. But I think the main thing is that we should not try to put ourselves into any bubble that is not us, because we've never been treated like delicate flowers in this country, unfortunately, even though we are beautiful flowers that have to like grow in the concrete, you know, but we are, you know, we are those flowers, but we're not treated as that. I mean, my flower analogy is kind of running away, but you know what I'm saying? Like, we need to embrace all that makes us Black women and, you know, deny anything that tries to take away our Black women, because Black womanhood, because that's just misogynoir, you know, and that's just denying what makes us us and ignoring and erasing us. And yeah, and I think that a lot of times we see in media images of Black women. Either we see, like Devon was saying, the sapphire type or the mammy type, or we see, which I've been noticing a lot more lately, is just sticking Black women into a white woman's space, you know, and that's not the answer either. We're not asking to, you know, be sitting on some, you know, tower with our hair flowing down. Like, that's because that's not what Black women do. You know, that's not how our hair works or anything like that. And we need to start having other experiences. You know, I remember reading something, I mean, even just having, you know, for example, Halle Bailey as playing the Little Mermaid with locks. Like I was talking to one of my friends thinking about, it makes sense for a Black woman to be a mermaid because a mermaid probably would have locks because, you know, they're swimming underwater and all these kinds of things. And that's more unique to a Black woman versus, you know, idealizing a Black woman to have luscious red hair like a white woman. That's just not going to happen.
Right. And I wanted to comment on what you said about putting Black women or trying to fit Black women into white spaces. It's interesting to think about how lynch culture is centered around protecting white women. And like it's been nothing for, you know, Black women, like Emmett Till versus Sandra Bland. You know, there's such a vast difference in how you guys were talking about being women, being asked to change to fit in, but just being yourselves Black women, you're already making change. Like you are Women's History Month, and we want to thank you all for coming, and we appreciate so much of hearing your insight and what you have to offer. We plan on doing things like this more often, just to hear more of your perspectives.
Thank you. This was, I think, a really great panel, and I'm not sure who said it. I'm sorry. I think 2 people said it. Absolutely right. Awareness is where it starts, and I think that this panel was really great as far as making people aware of the issues and giving us a place to continue the conversation. So great job. And again, you ladies are awesome. Like you are Black girl magic personified. I'm just, as someone who's older than you, I just can't tell you how proud, and I hope I don't sound like your mom, but just to see you guys just be authentically fabulous, each and every one of you.
Oh, thank you. I mean, we got you to lead the way. So thank you, Dr. Parker, for all of your insights and everything. And thank you guys for having us.
Yes, thank you. And I mentioned it in the chat, but I'm re-mentioning it here. But I just made the point that Black women are punished for the same feminism that white women advocate for. And I just think, and kind of wrapping this up, as this Black girl magic goes out into the world, you know, as we graduate, as we're moving into higher positions, I just think that like that note is an excellent reminder of who we need to be for the Black women coming after us and the Black girls coming after us. And yeah, just advocate for an inclusive feminism and not only a white feminism.
Can I also like just say thank you all so much for just this platform, for this space. Thank you ladies for this conversation. If there's any takeaway, like honestly, like show up authentically yourself. Like you shouldn't have to be anyone else but yourself, you know? The rest of the world, I guess, will adjust, but it's you and you.
I also want to say thank you guys for having me, and then like kind of like talking about a safe space. Like I felt so safe here. Like everybody spoke so eloquently, and like everybody was just on the same page the whole time. And I felt so heard and seen here. Thank you, Dr. Parker, for bringing up like information just about like violence in general and dating, which I think is a really interesting thing, specifically being in quarantine and like dating like virtually and all that stuff. And like everybody, like, yeah, thank you so much. And I would say kind of what Lauren said earlier, being unapologetically Black is what I want to be and what I strive to like pursue. And I think that is shown here with all these wonderful people. So yeah.
Any other lasting remarks?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna quickly just close out like again everybody. Thank you so much panelists. Paisley, Lauren, Alize, Devin, and Dr. Parker. You all were phenomenal women. I am glad to have gotten to hear your narratives and hear you speak out about like issues so close to your heart and to make me and my brothers more aware about what we can do and how we can show up for you all. So again, I want to thank you all for that.
And to close out, a small reminder, we are planning, our next event is planning on being a game night. So look out for more information about that. So bring your game face and have a good rest of your night. Thank you all.